And welcome everybody to our weekly live stream. We are coming to you from the Huckabee Theater in Hendersonville, which is Tennessee, just outside of Nashville, where we do our television show. And senior producer of the Huckabee Show, Pam Case, joining me as she does every Friday. I guess I should say every Friday that we do this, which is almost every Friday.
Almost every Friday.
Occasionally we have moments when we don't. Yeah. We're kind of sweating this week out because last week our primary guest got arrested at the airport on his way here. Peter Navarro, nabbed by the FBI in the dumbest thing I think I've seen in a long time.
Yeah. Well, we have at least 4 or 5 hours for that to happen to any of our guests that we plan on taping tonight. So.
We almost had a cancellation from Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis because she heard that the guest normally gets arrested flying into Nashville. So anyway, no, she's going to come, and to my knowledge, she's not going to be arrested.
We're going to try to keep the political theater to a minimum tonight,
oh my gosh.
if we can.
What a... People have no idea what that does when, like 4 hours before a show, you get notice that your primary guest, who's on for 2 segments, is in the pokey in Washington, in shackles, and unable to get on the plane and come to the show.
But we were calm. We had great guests. We had a wonderful show last Saturday night.
Yes, we did.
So it all worked out fine.
And we got a great one this weekend as well. We'll tell you about that later. But right now, we want to say thanks for joining us, and we hope that beginning right now, you will send questions to us in the chat. As always, we like to say, send a super chat. You get more visibility. More likely, you'll get read. Moderators are watching the chat for your questions. And of course, this is a great time before we dive right into the deep water for you to subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave us a comment, and always hit that like button and share it with other people. Some of the topics we're going to be touching today: the January 6th committee hearing. We'll also talk about the out-of-control inflation. Those numbers just came out this morning, and what are some of the effects that'll hit you and your family? And if we have time today, we may see if we can determine who's more out of touch with reality, Joe Biden or Joy Behar. Our favorite comment from last week, one of the things we've started doing is pull up a comment that we love from you, the one that we enjoy the most. And this is from last week's live stream, this comment. I asked the question, do you think new gun laws can prevent future mass shootings? In response to that, Chris Patty responded, blaming guns is like blaming needles for overdoses. Well said. My question for you this week, this is that one we want you to respond to. We'll be looking at them, and if you're the one that we think is the question or the answer of the week, we'll put you on next week. But the question is this: did you watch the Democrats' TV show about January 6th, and did it change your view? Be sure to leave your answers right there in the chat and in the comments section below. All right, we're going to get into some of the things. Let's start with January 6th television show. It was nothing but a TV show. This was not a hearing. Anybody who thinks this was a congressional hearing didn't watch it. First of all, the opposition had no say in it. This was a slick production produced by James Goldstone, formerly of ABC, who, by the way, was the one who produced the Princess Diana interview that she always said was the most horrible, I think, how did she call it, ambush, and also produced the Michael Jackson interview, which he was very, very upset about. So this guy's got a long history of producing these kind of gotcha things, and that's why they hired him. I mean, it makes perfect sense. But from the beginning, starting out with Benny Thompson, the congressman from Mississippi, and one of the things that I found just amazing was that he actually tried to tell us that this was an attempted coup. Watch this.
I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain.
Well, that was the wrong one. We were going to play that later, but let me go ahead and comment on it. That was Liz Cheney, Nancy Pelosi's personal lapdog Republican, who's on a very short lease to the Nancy. And, you know, when the original committee was set up, it was supposed to have a balance of Democrats and Republicans. But Kevin McCarthy, who was supposed to appoint the Republicans, being the minority leader, appointed some very responsible and qualified Republicans. Nancy Pelosi did not like those Republicans, and she refused them. She picked her own. Who did she pick? Trump-hating Liz Cheney and Trump-hating Adam Kinzinger, who was so spooked by the whole thing, and he, I guess, ran out of Kleenex from crying so hard, he's not even running for re-election. So, I mean, that's it. That's the two Republicans. So you get two people who hate Donald Trump almost as much as Nancy Pelosi does, and that's the balance. Now, that was Liz Cheney, and she was talking about dishonor. I would suggest that the greatest dishonor that you're ever going to see about a Republican is Liz Cheney, whose petulant attitude toward Donald Trump, because she got her feelings hurt over things that had nothing to do with January 6th, is such that all I can do is just hope and pray that the people of Wyoming come to their senses. They have a choice in this election, and maybe they can retire Liz Cheney. That would be a beautiful thing for the country. I'm just not at all, I don't even know how to say it. I just don't know how to express how frustrated I am with someone, not because she took a different position. She's free to have that position. But she was in the leadership of the party. She betrayed, really, the integrity of that committee. And when Nancy Pelosi said, I want me some Republicans that I can count on to do my bidding, she should have said, none of us will do that. We will act on our own. But she wanted the spotlight so badly that she's willing to be Nancy Pelosi's stooge, and that's the role she played last night. That's dishonorable, and I thought it was just tragic. Okay, now I think we have the actual Benny Thompson quote that I'd mentioned before. Let's watch.
January 6th was the culmination of an attempted coup, a brazen attempt, as one rioter put it shortly after January 6th, to overthrow the government. The violence was no accident. It represented Trump's last stand, most desperate chance to halt the transfer of power.
But there was a transfer of power. And what's more, this nonsense that this was an insurrection or a coup, folks, you cannot take over a government that has nuclear weapons and a standing army of 300,000 people with a couple of thousand folks armed with flagpoles. I'm not justifying anything those folks did who rioted, although there were a lot of people who never rioted, who never even entered the Capitol, and some of them got arrested as well, which is bizarre. Here's what you must understand. This was not an attempt of a coup. A coup means that you're going to try to militarily take over an office and throw the person out. You know what was an attempted coup? When the FBI and the CIA and the Democrat Party and the media conspired together to blame Donald Trump for Russian collusion and to try to overthrow the results of both the 2016 and the 2020 election, blaming Russia and spending $38 million of your tax money with Robert Mueller, trying to convince people that Trump was in collusion with the Russians. And after all that money and the most intense investigation, they could not prove anything because it didn't happen. But there was a coup attempt, and it involved James Comey and Jim Clapper and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and James Baker and a whole bunch of cast of characters from the Hillary campaign, including Michael Sussman and Hillary herself, and the list goes on. And why we didn't investigate that, well, I know why, and so do you. I don't even have to tell you. Just tragic. Now, the Republicans aren't completely sitting still. They are getting no role at all in these hearings. Keep in mind, they're not even invited to participate. They can't cross-examine any of the witnesses. The witnesses' statements are highly edited, so you're not really seeing. For example, Jason Miller, they played a clip from him, and he immediately said what they played was highly edited and did not reflect what I said. No context whatsoever. So it's a phony sham to begin with. And one of the people on the Republican side who at least is trying to offer some countering arguments is Elise Stefanik of New York. Here's what she had to say about this process.
So the fact that it was not just Benny Thompson who objected in the past, but also Jamie Raskin objected to the Electoral College counting in after President Trump's election, and he called for the impeachment of President Trump even prior to Trump's swearing in. So look at the Democrats on this committee. They have no basis. They are complete hypocrites. I agree with my colleague Jim Banks, and they want to avoid, again, focusing on the issues that matter to the American people.
I think Elise Stefanik is a great spokesperson for the party. She's tough, she's articulate, and what she said was very important. She was saying that back in 2016 when Donald Trump won, the Democrats went crazy, and they were trying to do everything possible to keep Donald Trump from being sworn in. And people forget that. The media obviously forgets it. They pretend that nothing like this has ever happened before. 4 years ago it did, when Hillary didn't win. Popeye would say it this way, Pam. This is embarrassing.
It is embarrassing. Absolutely.
All right. Do we have some questions rolling in?
We do. And of course, we do have the question of the day. We want to remind everybody, did you watch the Democrats' TV show? And that's what it was, as you mentioned, a TV show about January 6th. And did it change your view last night? You still have time to vote. If you're viewing today, make sure you do that. And the first question from Jill Groff, Governor, the January 6th debacle, can it overshadow the midterm elections?
Jill, I don't think it can. In fact, I think if anything, it's going to help the midterm elections roll toward the Republicans, because I've got confidence that most people, not all, some are really stupid, let's just be honest. Most people are pretty doggone smart. When they see this stuff last night, and by the way, not a lot did, the ratings were horrible, but those who did, if they actually watched it, they're smart enough to know when when somebody's pulling their chain. And there was a lot of chain pulling going on last night. And they would objectively ask themselves, now, who from the other side is going to talk? Oh, nobody. They weren't allowed. Oh, I see. So, and were any of these witnesses be brought in to actually give testimony and then have the other side question them in cross-examination? No, it's all on videotape. Well, that's clever. So you can edit it to make it sound like you want. So will it have an effect? Yes, but I think in a positive way for Republicans.
All right, let's continue. Joe Woodrum writes, Governor Huckabee, why is it so hard to get a constitutional convention together? If you ask me, it should happen every 10 years to make sure the federal government doesn't get too big for its britches.
Well, it's, let's just say it's busted those britches long time ago, Joe. A constitutional convention should be hard because amending the Constitution should be hard. I'm the first one to admit that, and I'm very much in favor of a constitutional convention. I'm on a national committee, for example, to bring a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. And the reason I am is because I don't have any confidence that Congress will ever impose upon themselves a balanced budget. I'd love to see us have term limits, lifetime ban on lobbying, and a host of other things. But I'd start with a balanced budget amendment. It's still hard. You've got to get 37 states to call for the convention. Then once the convention is held, the items that come out of it go back to the states for ratification. So, you know, it's not easy. It shouldn't be. But I'm so with you, Joe. We need it, and we need it now. And maybe it would help if we flushed a lot of folks out of Congress or got absolute commitments from them that if we send them back, that they will get some things done and that they would implement the beginnings of a constitutional amendment for term limits and lifetime ban on lobbying.
Sue Prov is writing this afternoon, what is the most important issue that is pressing the U.S. and or the world right now?
You know, the sort of the reflex answer is the economy, but I think it's deeper than that. I honestly believe, and this is the kind of thing that would cause the secular press to go berserk, I believe it's the loss of a moral foundation of government, period. Government cannot be capable of governing if it doesn't govern by a moral compass. It has to govern within the context of absolute right and wrong, so that the law is always applied equally, no matter who a person is. If it's the poorest vagrant on the street, he's still given the same protection of the law as a billionaire. And if a person is a member of Congress or highly connected, gets no special treatment any more than would the guy who's working a union job as a pipe fitter. And if we ever lose that, then we've lost our moral capacity to call ourselves a government of the people. So the economy sounds like it would be the biggest thing because it hits us right now today. But I would suggest that having a moral foundation for government, understanding that government is not God. God gives us government so that we can govern among ourselves, but do it in a responsible way. That's the most important.
All right, thanks, Gov. Rich Martin is asking today, Gov, and this is all about the wallet. Who voted to pay more for everything? Who's behind all that?
A lot of it is the result of stupid decisions. On the very first day in office, Joe Biden did several things. He declared war on fossil fuel energy. That immediately sent prices toward the up and supply toward the down, which then increased prices even more. He turned the spigots on for illegal immigration. That lowers wages because if people come in illegally, they will be willing to work at a lower rate than the people who work legally because they're paid under the table. He also started spending money in the stimulus bill. Excuse me, $1.9 trillion. That helped to add to inflation. If you start looking at all the things one by one by one that he did on his very first day, it set in motion what we now have, which is the largest inflation increase, 8.6, which was just announced this morning. That's the largest in 41 years. That's huge. And by the way, Putin had nothing to do with that. This was all going on before Putin invaded the Ukraine. So it's really a pretty serious situation. I thought the best comment I heard this week was from Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. And somebody said, well, what do you think we could do to get this country going again? He said, just go back and do everything we were doing the day before Joe Biden took office. That pretty well sums it up.
That's a good
Brilliant.
quote of the week.
Yeah.
All right, Cy Smith 23 is asking, how do we bring energy and manufacturing back to the USA?
Well, you have to give people who produce energy a reason to pull it out of the ground, knowing they're not going to be regulated out of business once they make the huge investment necessary to start producing, and that the government isn't going to go and clamp down on them. And that's something that Joe Biden has made it very clear. He wants to put the fossil fuel industry out of business. He wants us all to go buy an electric car. But guess what? 3/4 of the energy and the electricity to recharge your car, guess what it comes from? Fossil fuel. So this is the idiocy of all of this. It just makes no sense. Let me remind everybody, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, leave us a comment, a like, and a share. I want to go to talking about fuel prices. We've got some reports this week. It's kind of interesting that even networks like CNN, which try so hard to cover for Joe Biden, they find it very hard to do. Let's watch.
Well, Brianna, look, not only are we seeing gas prices continue to climb, but now they're rising at an even faster rate, in some cases 4, 5, even 6 cents a day. Just look at that national average, now up 64 cents in a month, up a quarter in just the past 7 days.
Yeah, up a quarter in the past 7 days. Highest prices we've ever had for the first time in all of American history. Gasoline is now averaging over $5 a gallon.
Yeah.
What
did you pay the last time you pumped?
$4.59.
Okay, same.
Arkansas is a little cheaper than some. I was looking in Nashville, it was like $4.79, I think,
sir.
across the street from our studio. So I do look at that stuff. You know, I'm not one that'll drive around town spending $3 worth of gasoline
Right.
to save 5 cents a gallon, because by then you're not saving anymore. I kind of know where in my area there's a good spot to get it. I'll tell you what, gas prices are so high that there is a police department in Michigan that can't afford to run their patrol cars.
Right, they've already hit their budget for the year and we're halfway through.
Yeah, here's what they're doing, watch.
Gas prices are so high, the Isabella County Sheriff's Office here says they've actually blown through their fuel budget already, so they will respond to some non-emergency calls by phone, try to resolve those issues by phone. Now, the national average for a gallon of gas hovering at just under $5 at $4.97 a gallon right now. Here in Michigan, gas prices have set a record high for 7 consecutive days.
So if you need a police officer in Michigan, you hope he can walk real well, because he'll have to walk to your house to respond to your emergency. It's like you can't make this stuff up. And you'd think that members of Congress, particularly the leadership like Nancy Pelosi, would be very concerned of how this is affecting your family. But here's Nancy Pelosi talking about inflation. It's amazing. It's hard to believe she even said this. Watch.
So things have improved, but inflation has gone up, and we must address that because the cost of food and the price at the pump. Now, the price at the pump is affected by shortages, some of it caused by Putin. This is Putin's price at the pump. Not all of it, but much of it. When you have lower supply, you have higher costs. That's just the way it is. So we have to recognize it. We have to mitigate for it. And that's part of what we have been doing, but we'll continue to do next week.
Always going to be next week. Nancy's going to do something. The Senate unanimously passed, now think about this, unanimously passed a bill this week that would have protected Supreme Court justices at their homes and would have given them the same protection that Nancy Pelosi, gets as a member of Congress. It goes to the House. Should be an easy lift. Every Democrat, every Republican in the Senate recognize that you cannot have Supreme Court justices being assassinated because they might make a decision that makes someone unhappy. And not just the justice, but their families, those with little kids like Brett Kavanaugh. It gets to the House, and Nancy Pelosi refuses to bring it up for a vote. She refuses to bring it up for a vote. And when asked why, she says, well, nobody's in danger this week. Everybody can get through the weekend. It's really tragic. But I just want to ask you, watching her talk, do you think she cares about you and your family? Do you think she's concerned how much you're paying for eggs and milk and meat, potatoes? Do you really think that? Do you think it bothers her that when a single mom goes to the gas pump and looks at the cost per gallon and asks herself, how much can I put in there? And will it get me to the daycare center to drop off my kids and to work for a job that inflation has taken 10% of my paycheck away, and then enough to get back to the daycare, pick them up, and get home and hopefully have food for them on the table? Do you think Nancy Pelosi is worried about that? I rest my case. Do you think she's worried about that, Pam?
I think not today or ever.
Okay.
Betty Boo's Homestead, thank you for the super chat today, Miss Betty Boo. Mr. Huckabee, how do the people get term limits for our leaders? If left up to them, it will stay the same.
You're right, Betty. It will stay the same. The only way it happens is a constitutional amendment through the Convention of the States. It's what we were talking about earlier with, I believe it was Joe. Look, that's why I'm for a Convention of the States. We passed term limits in Arkansas back in the early 90s, 92 to be exact, and I was a strong part of pushing for that. And a lot of people said, well, if you ever get elected, you won't be for term limits. Well, I did get elected, and you know what? I was even more for term limits, and I'm more for them now than I've ever been in my life. I truly believe nobody should get a government job forever. Particularly an elected or an appointed job. We need, for the same reason that you flush your toilet, sorry to be so graphic with my metaphor, but for the same reason you flush your toilet, we need to flush Congress regularly, because otherwise it's the same effect. Congress will never do this to themselves. Even the ones who say they're for term limits, once they get there, they typically say, oh, you know, I was for it, but man, I got here and I realized this is really hard work, and it takes a while to learn it. And we used to have state legislators that would say, you know, I can't learn the budget in 8 years. And I said, then you don't belong here, because you can become a neurosurgeon in 8 years. And I promise you, operating on somebody's brain is a heck of a lot harder than understanding the Arkansas state revenue budget. So that just doesn't wash. But I'd love to see it happen, but we'll have to take things into our own hands.
Albert Henson is writing today, Gov, is there a section in the Constitution that will allow the immediate change of leadership in the government?
No, there is not. And let's be very clear. That was intentional on the part of our founders. And frankly, it's smart. The founders understood that sometimes people get passionate and excited, and they might do stupid things. So they made it so that you have three distinct branches of government, each is check on the other. And even in the legislative branch, one of the three branches, you have two parts of the legislature, the Senate and the House. You know what most people don't realize? That until the early 1900s, around 1904, 5, the U.S. Senate was not elected by the popular vote of the people. In the original outline of our government and under the original Constitution, the House would be elected by popular vote, but the senators were appointed by each state legislature. And it was frankly the way it should be. It was brilliant, because the Senate would always watch out for the interest of the states to make sure that the national government didn't violate the 10th Amendment. That's how they did it. They sold the idea, oh, well, everybody ought to have a vote in it, not the legislature. Here's what happened. We have gone downhill since then because the federal government now is comprised in the legislative branch of two elected bodies, both of whom are more interested in staying in power than in making sure that what they're doing up there is good for their home states. I saw this as a governor. I used to say, you know, the Democrats may be the opposition, but the federal government is the real enemy. And they were. And they were constantly doing things that hurt states and our budgets. They didn't care. It wasn't their budget. All they cared about was what they could claim they did. So the history of the country really, I think, took a turn for the worse with the popular election of senators in the early 1900s. And now we're really paying for it. We're seeing the worst of it. And part of it is these guys stay forever, and there's no accountability to the people who would immediately know whether their policies are good or bad for the states.
Mr. Wright is asking a question that from time to time, I know you hear this question, Governor. What reasons or causes would make you get back into the political ring?
You know, if you could see the singe marks on me from being burned, having been promised that if I ran the last time, the people that would support me and make sure I wasn't out there by myself, you'd understand that there's only so many times you can get toasted to a crisp and ever want to trust people again who say, if you'll go out on point and you'll be willing to be the candidate, we will take care of making sure the campaign is funded, and you can focus on being the candidate, we'll focus on raising the money. So you go out there, you get in the field with your single-shot rifle, and you look around, where are all of those people who came to my home, looked me in the eye, and promised me they would help? They've disappeared. And, you know, when you almost lose your home twice by running for office, and there's just more to it. So God would have to speak to me in a very loud voice, and an angel needs to deliver a handwritten note signed by most of the host of heaven. I think that's pretty clear.
But other than that, you're thinking about
Other
running.
than that, I just may do it next year. Who knows? Let's take a look at this clip. This is Joe Biden on Jimmy Kimmel, which is amazing. Over 118 days, he doesn't show up for any interview. And he finally does one with a not very funny comedian, Jimmy Kimmel, on his show out in California. But what he says, it doesn't make sense. Let's listen.
I'm serious. You turn on the TV, look at the ads. When's the last time you saw biracial couples on TV? When's the last time you saw the way, I mean, people are selling products. They do ads to sell products. And they sell products when they appeal to people. This generation is going to change everything. We just got to make sure we don't give up.
That made no sense at all. I mean, that made no sense. And this thing about you never see biracial couples. Yeah, you do. You see every kind of person imaginable in the name of diversity and tolerance. The only people you don't ever see are Christian people portrayed in a favorable way. You never see them. But don't worry, Joy Behar on The View has our back. But this comment she made this past week about black people and guns may be one of the most blatantly racist things I've ever heard on TV. Watch.
Most AR-15 owners are former military, 35 plus
Let me
and
say
married.
one more thing.
So that's all I'm saying is that they're not just crazy people.
Okay. Here's the thing. Once black people get guns in this country, the gun laws will change. Trust me.
I don't trust you, Joy, and I'll tell you something. Black people are getting guns in this country. You know what demographic saw the largest increase in the possession and ownership of firearms last year? Black women. Up 56% from the year before. 56%. And why? Because people like you have convinced everybody that we ought to let the criminals loose. Don't put them in jail. Let them out. Don't make them pay bail or anything like that. And the cities, including the one you live in, are so unsafe that people know they got to protect themselves. So I give credit to the black women who have bought the largest increase of guns to protect themselves, because, by the way, if they live in Michigan, the cops may not be able to walk or run fast enough to get to their home while their house is being broken into. Well, that's going to do it for us. We've got to go. I want to remind you to be sure to leave your questions in the comments. We'll take a look at those. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. Be sure to answer our question of the week, and we'll be picking out one of those answers as our answer of the week. Be sure to watch the show tomorrow. We're going to have a great show, and we right now think that all of our guests will be here, none of which will get arrested on the way to Nashville. What's going to be on the show? Well, here's a little preview.
This week on Huckabee, Congresswoman Nicole Meliotakis, Illinois congressional candidate Chris Butler. Hilarious news stories on In Case You Missed It.
She's spending money like a U.S. congressman. That's what she's doing.
I Am Seconds, John Seidel. Illusionist Dan Stapleton. And country legend John Barry performs. Watch Huckabee on Saturday at 8, 7 Central, and again on Sunday at 9, 8 Central, right here on TBN.